Come down. Ooh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. Never have to cut you out like right now. You see, I don't have to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me try the marijuana. I was never you good. The vibe was straight. Showed you a couple of things and they finished change. I treated you right. Everything was a gift from a time to your bag and the color on your lip.
Welcome to Seahawks Man-to-Man Podcast, powered by Blue Wire. Shout out to the new company. My name is Michael Sean Dugar. You guys can follow me on whatever Elon Musk is calling that app these days. My at name has not changed on the app. Mikedugar. That's the name. Appreciate all of the love and support for everyone watching and or listening on our YouTube channel. Seahawks Man to Man is the name of the channel. That's Seahawks Man, the number 2 man. If you're listening to audio right now, that's cool. I love you. Slide over to YouTube real quick. Hit the like or subscribe button. Just slide right back. You don't even got to stay over there. We just appreciate that love and support in that way. Thank you so much. Kris, go ahead and talk to him.
What is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Christopher Kidd. You can follow me on Twitter at CKIDD206, and that's CKid206.
We are continuing our pre-draft talk discussion with people who know more about these prospects than we do, because that's what we do on this show. We call up the experts to talk shop. Returning to the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast to talk about the trenches, we have the homie from The Athletic, Nick Baumgardner. Nick, welcome back, sir.
What's up, guys? Doing? Good, fellas. How are you? It's draft season. Good to see you. Good to see you, man.
Yes.
You're in my layer. Get ready. Yeah, we're almost here.
Yeah, I almost had forgot that the draft is coming up. But when the Seahawks haven't had a new coach for a while, so the newness of Mike Macdonald has kind of consumed my brain a little bit. And then I look up and I'm like, wow, I haven't done a mock draft since January or something.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so
a lot going on.
A lot going on. A lot of intrigue here with Mike Macdonald as a new coach and his staff and everything. And thank you for reminding us pre-show that you actually Mike Macdonald a little bit when he made that cameo as a defensive coordinator for the Michigan Wolverines in 2021. What can you tell Seahawks fans about Mike Macdonald from your time around him?
Man, he is a super smart guy, and I would say it's weird to me in some ways, and maybe not weird, maybe it's ironic that he and Jim Harbaugh, both got NFL jobs in the same year, because if it weren't for Mike Macdonald, that's not going to happen. They don't win those Big Ten titles. They don't win this recent national title. He completely rebuilt their defense. Everything they ran the last 2 years after he left was pretty much an offshoot of what he installed. He's the guy who unlocked Aiden Hutchinson. He was super, super popular with assistants and players alike inside the building. I think he would have done really well as a recruiter had he stayed longer, which surprised me because he's, you guys have been around him enough to know now he's a nerd, right? Like he's like a nerdy guy who's kind of I think he likes that sort of, and he doesn't hide from it. That's fine. But I do think he has a way of talking to guys that I was surprised at because he didn't play, you know what I mean? And so, but he's a good one. That's a really good hire. And I thought that was a really, really good fit too.
You said something there that's very interesting, and I think it ties to what the Seahawks are hoping for with Mike Macdonald, and that's him unlocking players. Because if I got this right, Mike Macdonald inherited the winningest team of all the coaches that got hired in the NFL cycle. Like usually teams inherited pretty, Washington, whoever. I can't remember all the teams that got fired. New England, you guys.
It was the best job, in terms of
winning. It was the best job in terms of how many wins did the team have before you got here. And they overhauled the roster a little bit, mostly just cleared out a couple bad contracts, but not like a complete tear down to the studs, which implies, in essence, we think we need better coaching. Front office is still here. Philosophy in the front office is still the same. Mandate from ownership is still the same. So it feels like the front office and ownership is counting on, hey, Mike, we know you didn't bring any players with you from Baltimore. We know you didn't bring any coaches with you from Baltimore. It's really just you. You're the sauce. Fix everything. So what did you see in Michigan to see that he unlocked or got the best out of players?
Man, it was wild. That's exactly what happened there. He showed up, right? I think he brought maybe one guy with him from his staff there in Baltimore. He was a linebackers coach, but he shows up and they were not good. And it's not that different from what Seattle's going through right now in terms of Michigan was running a really old system. They were running a lot of man, a lot of single high, a lot of man. They would play some cover 3 and some zone mixed in there, but it was really aggressive man coverage all the way, and they would get beat all the time by these Ohio State teams and the teams that had all these athletes. So Macdonald gets there and sort of takes inventory of all their talent and then rebuilds the entire defense around the talent. So they had Hutchinson that year, right? They had David Ojabo, another one that year, and a couple other guys. He would do all the pressure packages and all that stuff. They were all built around those guys' strengths and sort of to hide weaknesses in other parts of the defense, right? So it was also really interactive. I remember that too. I remember it was a lot of feedback from the players, like what worked, what didn't work. Like Mike was really, really good with that. That I remember, right? That those guys missed him when he was gone. I remember that a lot too. And Hutchinson is one. I mean, I'm around him still here in Detroit. I think he still thinks very highly of him. So, yeah, I think that's a really good fit because, again, like you said, Mike, they're advancing over. Pete was there forever, and they ran that system better than anybody. But we've advanced beyond that now, and you've got to sort of juice it up. So I think that's a pretty smart hire. I think it'll work out.
Chris, that might be the most optimistic review we didn't got of.
It fits, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, particularly that part about what they were running was I want to call simple, or they just had
but it's older.
Yeah. That was and Pete tried to modernize the defense a little bit, hired some Fangio disciples, and was like, hey, let's do what's the new hotness around the league. That kind of just it didn't work. So we'll see what Mike Macdonald can do because they had a way of doing things. Seattle 3, cover 3.
Yep,
they got away from at least recently. That's like the foundation, the baby. And now it's like, let's not do that. Let's be better.
Right.
Then with relatively same players.
Exactly.
Just
you can and just coach them better. So I'm interested in that one for sure.
I like that. I like that insight. Go ahead, Kris.
Basically, John Schneider said that he's not trying to overpay for guards in free agency. And that is mainly because the draft class is strong. So, Nick, how do you see this draft class in 2024?
Yeah, I think that's a really good move in general for a lot of teams. I think a lot of teams, especially teams that run the ball, I think you want to pay your tackles. You want to pay your center if you can. And if you've got a generational guard, like, okay, fine. But otherwise, if you can reload, you can reload. And the cool thing about this class, I think, is it's really loaded at tackle, but there's also a lot of tackles in this class that can play guard or tackle. And I think that, that's become a common thing in college. We've seen these guys play more and more. They get to college and they immediately start to play something that they've never played before. So you learn to play as many positions as possible because they know NFL teams like that. And I think when you look at pieces like, we're going to talk about some of these guys, but Troy Fautanu from Washington is a guard or tackle, depending on what you want to do, depending on what your roster looks like. If it changes in a couple of years, he could change. And so I think that that's the kind of a cool thing. There's a couple guys like that in this class, and it's a really, really deep tackle class in general that stacks up pretty well. So I think that, if you need help up front, this is a good year to need it.
So that means day 2 prospects. Are there any immediate contributors for the offensive line? Because the Seahawks are probably going to get some guys on the offensive line, and day 2 might be where they get a bunch of them. But I want to know from you, are there any guys that stand out that can be contributors?
Yeah, there's a bunch. I mean, in terms of guard only, that's when you get into day 2, it gets more of the guard only guys. Christian Haynes from UConn, Christian Mahogany from Boston College. Our 2 guys, Cooper Beebe, Beebe. I don't know how to say his last name. Is it Beebe?
It's Beebe.
Say it wrong. Yeah, but those are 3 guys right there that are really athletic and really agile, really, I guess, versatile in a way, but tough. And they played a lot of football. Mahogany and Haynes, particularly. Those are 2 guys that, and I would say Cooper fits into this category too. Guys that can get movement up front and guys that I think can walk in to an NFL team right away next year. And, you're not going to dominate anybody, but they can hang with an offensive line and start to create some movement and hang in there in the run game. A lot of these guys can hang in pass pro coming out of college anymore because they're just better athletes, but especially inside because you're not seeing an Aaron Donald every single time you line up, but it's the run game now. It's can you move somebody? And those 3 guys right there that we talked about, it's 330, 325, that sort of range. So some guys in there that can definitely road grade for you.
One name that stood out immediately when you said it is Cooper Beebe. And that's someone that when I pulled up the YouTube highlights and was watching it, I was blown away by how many times he was getting out and moving folks. And I thought, oh my goodness, that would be a great project for the Seahawks. And I just wanted to see if maybe I'm right, or you're like, no, Kris, he's not the guy you're looking for, but there's other guys.
No, I think I think you're onto it there with him. I mean, he's a guy also who's played a bunch of different spots. I think he's played tackle, guard. The weird thing about him is he's got the short arms, like really short arms. It's less than 32 inches, which is really not ideal at all. But like you say, I mean, you turn the tape on, we're seeing it right here. I mean, he moves and carries his power as well as anybody you'll see in the draft. I mean, right there, boom, that punch. The short arms is a problem if your hands are all over the place, but his aren't. Like usually he's fine. He moves his feet, his hands are with him, and all that power is there too. So I like him a lot, and I think there's a couple guys like Mahogany plays a little bit like him, Haynes as well in terms of the movement and just creating shock like that. And that's what you're looking for. Guys that are 330. He's 331, I think, at a combine. So he's a guy that'll drop because that length isn't ideal, but he's a really good player.
So, Nick, there was something we were talking about this with Deontay Lee. Shout out to him on our last Man-to-Man podcast. We were talking about linebackers and stuff and kind of where the game is going. And I kind of presented this to him as well. As you know, like the linebackers seem to be getting smaller. We're not producing 245-pound guys really who can like move and come downhill. And so my thinking kind of is, okay, I know the NFL is cyclical. So
exactly.
Are we going to perhaps see more value on these guys who are 330-ish, whatever, who even if they're not great movers, like Cooper obviously can move, but even if they're not, hey, I'm going to get a guy who's 330, me and your little 230-pound linebacker, we're going to start dancing. And I feel like my guy's going to win. Maybe am I tripping? You think maybe we see more value on these bigger guards like that for that reason?
Yeah, until we see something happen with linebackers get back up to 240, 245. Which ain't happening. Everybody wants to be a pass rusher, so that's not happening coming out, right? So until that changes, you nailed it. You nailed it, Mike, because the teams now are saying, okay, whatever, you're going to go small and fast. We're going to go back to bulking up, and we're going to invest in guys that are, with the quick feet and can move around too. So I think you're going to see a mix. You're going to see the guys that are 330 plus have a lot of value for a lot of teams and be in there because a lot of teams are leaning more into the gap stuff now. I think all four of those teams that were in the Final Four last year were heavy run teams that were all downhill with really good offensive lines and really good, various, not just like a simple run game, run games that were really hard to plan for and really difficult to sort of scheme against. So, yeah, I think it's the big guys will have a spice too, but also, man, if you're 315 anymore, 310, 315, like you said, because if everybody's 230, 235 and you're 315 and you can move and carry your power, then it's a win either way. And I think that teams are getting more and more downhill with everything as it goes. And you're going to look to get younger a lot too, with the guards and the offensive line and everything as you go.
Now, this next name hits close to home because I'm sure a lot of Husky fans might listen to our podcast, and that's going to be Troy Fautanu, left tackle, that is. If the Seahawks do keep the 16th pick, there's got to be no way they should pass on this kid, right? Considering he played under Grubb last season, he's familiar with it. What are you seeing from the tape that says he could be a good fit in Seattle? In this scenario, it'd probably be guard unless something comes out again with Abe Lucas's knee. So, thoughts on that?
Man, I love him. I do. I think that is a great fit. I think for the reasons that we just talked about a little bit a second ago. Number one, he could come in and play guard right away. He was a very good tackle at Washington for a good number of years, and he's got long arms. We just talked about Cooper being short arms. I think Troy's over 34 inches, so the length will be there for him if they ever need him to be a tackle. Whoever takes him, but he can come in right away and be a guard. I mean, he's a guy that there's not too many that get off the ball and get out and start moving faster than him. And then the other part of him too is he carries power a lot like Cooper does, but that bend, and he's never out leveraged. He always has a way of, sinking and moving around guys. I think he would be a terrific zone guard who can also probably surprise people with his power. But yeah, like he's a really, I think, valuable piece and a guy that's like kind of built for the modern NFL because these injuries on the offensive line all the time, every week it's somebody and something, and you've got to find ways. And the guys that can play multiple spots and wear multiple hats are so valuable. So that's one that I think it would be no problem for him to do that. And I think that would be a good pick.
Where do you think he can improve in his game to take him to the next level at the NFL?
I think strength gain for him is still kind of the big one. He is so fast. I think he had one of the best. I think he was 171 on the 10 split, which is really, really good in terms of get out, which is fast enough to play tackle and fast enough to deal with some of these guys up front at guard. But I think he's a little light and he's under 320. And like we were just talking about, fine for linebackers, fine for a lot of defensive fronts, but not fine for every defensive front. You're going to run into some teams. Aaron Donald's gone now, but there's still some guys that come out that'll create problems for you. So more power and just more general strength to his body as he goes.
I'm really hoping that the Seahawks do have the 16th pick. They really pick this kid up. I think
he's a good player.
What you just explained, I think it'll fit right in, and he can play guard if needed. And then with the Abe Lucas situation, there's some security there. So I'm really sold on Troy right now. I don't know how you feel, Mike.
Well, I'm sorry, I was a little distracted here. I didn't know, so we've incorporated, running some films, some clips, while we talk. And this morning, I didn't get a chance to watch them before we had Nick on. Kris, were those Apple Cup highlights you just had during the finals? Are you kidding me? Dog, what is that?
I just wanted to get some tape out there. We're not discussing what tape it was. I didn't go through and say, dang, I can't put this out there. Because overall, Mike, I thought it was a great game.
Oh my goodness.
I lose. Okay.
It was an objectively entertaining game. Like if you had no skin in it, we had skin in it. Had lots of skin in it. Every little skin cell I got was invested in that. Oh, that hurt. It was like a first clip too. I was like, oh my goodness.
Oh man.
Objectively though, I'm with you. I think sometimes it really is just it lines up. I don't think every college coach who jumps to the pros should just try to grab all their old players. I just think that's a slippery slope. But the combination of talent, need, Ryan Grubb, and his O-line coach Scott Huff.
Right. Yeah.
It's
just a good fit in all ways. And man, those guys, the value that a guy like Tristan Wirfs is like this in Tampa. He just played right tackle forever, switches to left. Penei Sewell is going to do the same thing at some point. This is that with him. I mean, you have him at guard for now, but if a situation arises, who knows, in a year or two, your contracts and your cap and everything else, if you got to move him, whatever, move him. It'll be fine. I think that's guys can do that now. And that's a real good value, not just for today, but for his rookie contract. And then hopefully, his second contract and beyond as well.
Okay. That's good to hear.
And even though Aaron Donald is gone, you still got to get.
There's still dudes. Yeah. So he's got to get stronger, but yeah, right. Right,
yeah, you still need that. When I was watching, this is an aside, but everyone's posting Aaron Donald highlight clips. When he retires, and Russell's, I swear, Russell's getting dropped in 50% of Aaron Donald's career highlights. It's just him spinning Russell around for 5 minutes in all of these clips. They play each other twice a year, so
that's the problem. It's not going to be as bad for the Seattle center anymore, but yeah, there's still some guys that you come across for sure.
Yeah, and of course the Rams load up with Kobe Turner and they grabbed the other Byron Young in the draft.
Yeah, Young was he was really good
immediately to just pass on, hey, so they can terrorize Seattle some more. But I was like, man, no, Russ really got rocked around by this kid. So there's something that's been standing out to me, and I want to talk about Christian Haynes for a little bit from UConn. With Cooper, even with Christian. I don't have the number of starts of Troy in front of me, but it feels like some of these guys have been started a long time.
Yeah.
I think Christian's up to nearly 50 starts. Cooper might have hit 50. So these guys have been playing for a long time on top of just being good too. What are you seeing maybe with the pro readiness of some of these guys who have played upwards of 50 games in college?
Yeah, this is a weird year for that because it's the COVID empty out year. This is the last year of all the guys that had that extra year of eligibility, and a lot of guys stayed. And that's the other thing. NIL has changed a lot of the game here, especially for linemen. We've seen a lot of linemen stay that you wouldn't think. A lot of interior guys that otherwise in years past, if they got a third round grade, they're out of there. That's not really happening anymore. So yes, it's been a really good thing, I think, for a lot of them, like Haynes, Mahogany. Mason McCormick is a kid from a smaller school, who's another one who's played I think he's a 6-year guy who's played almost 55, almost 60 games, something like this. Same thing with Cooper. It's they played all these games and you look at it and you're like, man, maybe that's too much. Maybe that's a lot of wear and tear on the body. And that's to a point, maybe that is fair. But I think, for the rookie deal, when you're asking them to come in and play right away, they're ready to go. They're ready to go because they're grown adults. And we've seen this. Michigan just did this in college football. They've attacked the transfer portal in ways where they go out and find the best old lineman they can find and put him in their line, and the guy fits right away. And they're just older and smarter than everybody else. And that really is the key at the NFL level, right? It's not the physicality. All these guys are great athletes, and most of them can hang physically. It's the mental. It's the smarts. It's can you do what's necessary to get through it. And if you play 50 games, like Haynes, he played at UConn, and they weren't good at all, but it doesn't matter. Like he was knocking people around every single game, and he was in there doing it week in and week out, even when they were bad. Like if you've gone through that and hung through, man, you're going to be okay. And I think there's a lot of guys this year that qualify in that area.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Christian. It was funny. Me and Kris were talking pre-production before we had you on, and I was like, Kris, his first year of college was 2018.
Yeah, long time, man.
That guy must love Connecticut. He has been there for quite some time. Oh man, yeah, he's been there for a while too. And like you said, it's not like they're over there competing for natties or something like that.
No, I know. Like it's a weird deal, right? Where it's like you can make a little bit of money now, and it's not a lot, but like. I don't know. I think a lot of guys, they just get comfortable in there. And plus, he's one that kind of got better as he went. But yeah, I don't think it's looked at as quite the negative as it once was. But these 6-year guys, that's not normal. And that's probably going to go away here pretty quick.
Well, the thing that, so I'm with you. I don't think that it's like a negative because, like you said,
especially at the lineman,
yeah, linemen, you can play. You know, I watched them. How old was Dwayne Brown when they re-signed him? It was mid-30s.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah, so you can still get a bag, you know, and play at a high level deep into your 30s or whatever. So it doesn't really matter. But the one thing I'm usually curious about when a guy has played so much ball is like, hey, can you play like tomorrow? That's the thing I'm looking for. Yeah. So with someone like Christian, it's like, hey, if the Seahawks take him, let's say on day 2 they find a way, say, hey, we just took Christian Haynes from UConn. Are we talking about a day 1 starting guard?
Yeah, I think that's possible. I think that's a possibility with him, Mahogany. You know, and I mentioned McCormick. Zach Zinter would be another one if he can be healthy. But there's a couple guys there that you could get in the 2nd or 3rd round that I think you could realistically say if they're healthy and everything else, like you come in here and get yourself ready with the playbook and everything else, and you should be fine. You should be ready to go. It's not going to be dominant. It's not going to be anything where we're talking about you're awesome or whatever. But, you know, the Rams just did this last year with Steve Avila from TCU, who's a lot like Cooper Beebe, a guy who played like 4 or 5 spots on the offensive line over his entire career, did everything that was asked of him, didn't really dominate, but was a really good player, was really physical, comes into the Rams situation and was much better by the end of the year, but like a really steady player. I think he started the whole year for him. And, you know, those are guys that are like the awesome value picks for me in like that 2nd, 3rd round, because you can always find a guard or a center. And this year there's a lot of really good centers. But you can always find a guard, I feel like, in the 2nd or 3rd that can come in and physically and mentally hang for you at least and get you through a game. Maybe not like dominate, but like you're not replacement level player. Like you don't have to pay him a lot. He can go in there and do his job and you're not going to worry about it. And I think you can do that in this draft for sure because there's a lot of those older guys that are still around.
You mentioned sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Well, that's probably what John Snyder's getting at. Right?
Yeah, I think so.
You know, I don't know how old Damian Lewis is, probably like 26 or something like that. But let's say I think Damian Lewis got 4 years, 53. So it's like 13 and some change from the Panthers, which good for D-Lou. But I can see John's wheels turning, being like, this guy's like 26, maybe 27. I got to look up what D-Lou is. But if I can get Christian Haynes, who's 23 or whatever, 24, a couple years younger, can play him right away, restart that cycle on a, you know, rookie deal that's, you know, 4 years and $5 million maybe, whatever
whatever. And even if you want to make a little extension on him or whatever, if you had to, like, you could do it. But like to your point, you're not going to pay a guy unless you're just dominating at that position, you ain't getting paid. And I think the receiver, it's getting there too. You know, like that's getting to that spot too. But that's a different conversation for a different show, I'm sure. Yeah.
You're good. You mentioned how talented the center class is and how good they are. Who are so let's say the Seahawks are like, screw it, we don't need a tackle. We want to go center at 16. Who is a prospect that you would say you got to get this guy because he's going to make a big difference on your offensive line?
The best center in the class is Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, who is 21. He's really young.
Wow.
And I think that, you know, he's got short arms, shorter than you would like, but he is a phenomenal athlete. He was at the Senior Bowl, and I don't think he lost a single rep the entire week. And he's only a junior, right? So he got to go because, you know, now everybody gets to go to the All-Star games. So he had an awesome spring evaluation period. 6'3", 334, so he's got the big size. He can hang in there with big guys. He carries. It's a lot like, when we're watching the clips of Beebe running around. He moves too. Like, he can get out and pull and lead. I don't know if he's that high. Like, I mean, I've looked at that I've looked at him for them a couple times in some of the mocks that I've done.
Okay.
And I think that the conversation on Powers Johnson is like, it just depends on the scout or the team, because there's some teams I don't think he's a top 20 pick, but there's some I think that would be like, man, if he's there at 17 or 18, we'd probably do it, that kind of thing, because I think he was a Remington winner last year as a young center, smart guy. I don't know. To me, sometimes we overcomplicate that. Like, Tyler Linderbaum was a kid a couple years ago the Ravens picked up out of Iowa, there were not 20 players better than him in that draft. And he went 28, whatever it was, because he's a center. And everybody was like, well, okay, he's going to be an all-pro for the next, and he has been, every year since. So he's one of those guys that I look at. Zach Frazier is another one from West Virginia that if you were a little bit lower, you know what I mean? If you were in the 20s, like, those would be guys that I would be like, oh, all over it. But they're in a weird spot. So I'm not sure if that would be something that they would want to do it all the way up there.
It's back-to-back weeks where our guests are reading our podcast questions that we have set
reading
up.
your mind, yeah.
Yeah, so you brought up Zach Frazier, and I remember last year we had John, you talked about Olu, and you were pretty high on him.
Yeah.
In that regard, how do Zach Frazier and Olu stack up? Is it a wash where Zach is just far more, he has better skill set, or do you see a competition there that if the Seahawks do draft, let's say a Zach Frazier somewhere in the draft, that he could come in and compete, or would that be an automatic starter?
Yeah, he would be. I mean, I think he's better than Olu. I think he would be a guy that Olu would be a little nervous about if the Seahawks take him, or Jackson, Powers Johnson, same thing. I mean, Frazier does the thing like we were talking about before, Mike. He does some of the stuff that Olu doesn't do, which is he can move guys a little bit. He does have some of the same issues, and then he'll get stuck up front, and he'll get, maybe he's not driving people 5-6 yards off the ball like a Ragnow or one of these guys does. Those guys are kind of mutant-like. But Frazier is bigger than Powers Johnson in terms of his length, and he runs and moves just the same. And he's got like the big, almost like 11-inch hands. Like, he's got the big grip strength where he could just like ragdoll guys and toss them around. I think that overcomes a lot of maybe the size issues for him. So he's a guy that I've heard people talk about him at the bottom of the first. I think maybe no later than top of the second for him. He is coming off an injury, which is a tough deal for him a little bit too. But I think Dane saw him in Brugler. Dane saw him in March or maybe February, and he was running on a treadmill already. He had a leg injury, so I think he's going to be good to go. And I think he's a guy that would probably start right away. But he also, I think, could play guard if you needed him to. Wouldn't be impossible for him to do that. So I think I've heard some teams maybe look at him as maybe they take him as a guard and then they want him to be their center in a couple of years, right? That sort of situation. So I could see that for him somewhere too.
And it's a shame that Pete Carroll's not around currently the Seahawks anymore. Well, I guess he's advisor or whatever. I don't know if he's
he'll always be around, right? Somewhere in spirit anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, of course. There should be a statue of him chewing gum outside of the Seahawks stadium here in a year or two. But I bring that up because reading about Zach earlier, and it's like, man, Pete would have loved his wrestling background.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Pete was really big on, I think one of the first things he asked the prospects, whether at the combine or on the 30 visits, is, hey, what other sports did you play? Like, talk to me about playing baseball or running track. And for the linemen, it was usually, did you wrestle? That was usually one. Some of them played basketball too, usually like a tackle. But the guards and centers usually were wrestlers. Yeah. And it sounds like Zach Frazier was, I forget which state.
He was a good wrestler. Yeah.
Oh, man. He was out
I don't know the state either. I think him and Powers Johnson both, I think, were wrestlers at one point in their life. But I know Frazier was like a beast wrestler. Not just like, oh, he wrestled. Like, he was like a legitimate wrestler, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Zach was a 4-time state champ or something like that.
Yeah. I'm not sure he lost many times. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I read some scouting report. I think he only lost twice in
maybe his whole life. Yeah. Like, he's that guy, man. When he gets like 11-inch hands, is like, for a guy who's 6'2", 6'2.5", that is nuts. Like, I don't know what, like, that's like when we see like a 6'7", 6'8" guy, you talk about 11-inch or an NBA player, sometimes we talk about that, right? Yeah, right. Like, that's big. So when he gets that paw on you and just rips in, like, you can't do anything. And yeah, that's that's tough stuff. But he's a really good one. I like him a lot.
Yeah. So what stands out about, I'm not gonna act like I'm a center expert, but I did watch. I did watch a little bit, not a little bit. I watched a lot of like Olu last year.
Yep.
For some training camp stuff. Preseason, regular season. I only played 100 snaps regular season, but I was going through my rookie recaps at the end of the year. I was like, man, this Olu's confusing me, man. This is a big guy. He's a big athletic guy, and then you're asking him to go move someone, or we're trying to run the rock. It's like, oh wait. No. Actually move the guy. Come on. Go
Not
move
just
him. Go
turn
move
him.
him.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And when I was looking at Zach, that's actually the first thing that jumped out. I was like, oh, I ain't gonna have to tell him that. He gonna move the guy.
No.
I like that. I like that because the Seahawks didn't have like an identity in their run game last year. I didn't really feel like you shouldn't be one dimensional, but I want you to master in something,
right.
Whether you gap team, out wide zone team, whatever, just master in something and then build, around that. It feels like a Zach pick would suggest like, hey, we're about to move people.
And he's nasty. Like you can see in the clips here, man. Like, I mean, finishing all the time. Like, and that's the thing. Like Olu is not a big finisher. He's a really smart player. Like he's never in the wrong spot, never in the wrong position, really good in pass pro. But like he doesn't move people and he doesn't finish in the run game either. He just is really good at sort of getting in the way, turning a guy, and like that doesn't always work at the big boy level, right? So this is a different situation. He does have some of that though, where he can get a little bit bullied, but I do think the strength and the power that he has and that wrestling background of the grip strength and everything else, that overcomes a lot of the lightness or whatever, if you will. I mean, there's a clip of him and big Devondre Sweat from the Texas game where he just sort of like, and Sweat is 345 pounds, wherever he is, right? And he just sort of gets one hand on him and turns him and just like dunks him on the ground. And you're like, what the hell is that, right? That's crazy. But that's the kind of strength that Frazier's working with. He's a really good one.
Yeah, from all the year, the post Max Unger run of centers in Seattle has been just wildly underwhelming.
It's tough, man. Center's a tough spot to get right. When you have a good one, you want him to never quit. You want him to never leave. Yeah.
The Seahawks said, you know what? We need another receiver, so we're going to get rid of him.
Yeah, we're going to get rid of him. You can't do that. Can't do it.
I feel like every team has their what if or whatever. And, you can't get every pick right. It's not really how the draft works. But and it's unfortunate because it's not even his fault. But the D. Eskridge over Creed Humphrey pick is going to live in infamy until the Seahawks find a center. As soon as they find one, that'll be fine. But got to find one because seeing what's going on at center, seeing what's going on with D, seeing what's going on with Creed.
And how many people overthought it with Creed too? Like he went at the end of the first round and he's like, I mean, immediately he was the best center in the league as a rookie, for God's sake. Like that's how good he was. So yeah, if they're good enough and if the staff thinks they're good enough, take them. Like, because center could be worth their weight in gold, man. If you could just lock them up and don't worry about it for the next 8 years or something like that, like that's big time.
Yeah, and especially if you have a veteran quarterback too. If you have a scheme that control, like your center's going to do the mic points most likely, but having I wouldn't necessarily put a rookie center with that's a good point. Caleb Williams or something. Maybe I want one of them to have some experience so we can get our protections right and everything and our mic points in the run game. But Gino, 33, 34, whatever.
Yeah, he'd be fine. He'd probably help the kid too. He probably would be good for the center for a rookie center playing with a guy like Gino,
especially a kid from West Virginia.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my goodness, that's on the stars.
Take a kid from West Virginia. Gino will be like, yo, I don't know if they have some catchphrase or something like that.
Probably got something weird, but I don't know what it is. But they probably know what it is. Yeah,
whatever it is, like, yo, homie, let's lock in. Because that is like a legit. I don't know how legit it is, but I do feel like you can see that sometimes where I don't want to put a rookie center of like a CJ Stroud. Like, let me get him a vet center, or vice versa. If we do have, if we put a vet center with you guys get what I'm saying. Like, I do 100%. Think that has to go into it. As well. Talking with Olu last year was very interesting. I would just talk to him on the side every once in a while, like, hey, how does mic points work? And like this and like combo blocks. And one day he was telling me about it. I was like, dude, stop. I have no idea what you're talking about. And he was like, not in a jerk way, but I was just like, bro, what?
Yeah, man.
All that before the ball is snapped?
Like they're looking at the safety and stuff. Like they're looking at what the corner is doing. Like when I first sat down with a center, like an NFL center, and had them go through the whole thing with me, I was like, you're looking at what? Like what? Like how are you even like? And it's like, yeah, man, like you got to know all this. And it's like, geez, okay. Like, yeah, they're crazy. No one gets it. Like it's the most undervalued position on the field, I think, usually. And underpaid too. It's not, those guys don't get paid like they probably should.
Yeah, and like you said, when you have a good one, you can just ride with that dude forever.
Yeah, you never want him to leave. That's what it should be. And it's like Kelsey. I mean, man. But they, you know what? The Eagles, being the Eagles, as good as they are, they drafted his replacement 2 years ago. He's been playing guard, and now he's going to be ready to go. So a lot of teams will be looking to do that, I think, with Frazier too, maybe this year.
Oh yeah, no. Very few GMs, it appears, have like trenches foresight like Howie Roseman over there.
Nobody does. That was the smart. Yeah, that was brilliant.
He's like, oh, wait a minute, this guy's up in 2 years. All right, well, that's what position group I'm standing next to in Mobile. Let's look for the future.
That's right.
Before we slide to the defensive side of the ball, because the Seahawks really need some help there as well. Are there any other guards or centers? You're just like, yo, if you were in the Seahawks draft room and they're like, hey, they turn to you, they say, Nick, how'd you get in here? What the hell are you doing here? But then after they get over whatever your answer is, they say, hey, we need your help. Who's the guy you're willing to stand on this table right here for? Is who are you giving them? If it's anyone we haven't mentioned.
Anyone we haven't mentioned? I mean, all the guys we mentioned, I like a lot. I did mention Mason McCormick, the kid from I can't remember, is it North Dakota or South Dakota, one of the two. I always get them mixed up. Cedric Van Pran from Georgia, the center. That's another center. He's probably a center only, but he's another one that people don't talk about a lot. And because he played at Georgia. He played in an awesome offense and an awesome team with all these other guys. And that was the thing with Olu. He played in a great line. And sometimes when you play with other really good players around, you don't quite know, like, is it him or is the guy next to him on the offensive line? Sometimes that can be a little bit. But Van Pran's one of these guys who's just he goes out there and dumps people. Like, he's legit. And I think he's another one. The top three centers in this class, Powers Johnson, Frazier, and Cedric Van Pran, I think are all guys that would surprise people with their readiness in year one, as you know, if they had to go in there and play center. I think all of them are really sharp. This is good center class, I think, top to bottom.
All right, John, you hear that? You, John Schneider, Ryan Grubb, Scott Huff. Like, I think it's one of those times where I think people can get down with like the organizational philosophy of like, we're not about to give a Robert Hunt $100 million, right?
No.
Right now. We're just not going to do it. God bless the Panthers I mean, you could tell John this offseason is trying to be like, what are the Panthers doing? Right? Because they give Delu $50 million and Robert Hunt $100 million.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, also I see their vision though. Like, yo, our quarterback is short, so we don't want
anyone we got to do something here.
Back into him. Like, I get it. Sometimes you have to overpay for that, particularly when you don't have draft capital. But John's like, I ain't doing that. I will go ahead and grab me maybe one or two of these kids in the draft. And like you said, it seems like a good year. Do that, John.
It is a good year for that.
Just get the right guy. Just get the right guy. And I think that can work out. Let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball and kind of frame this discussion on what Mike Macdonald talked about. I just seen him in Orlando, and he was like, we want to build a wall like right up the middle. He's the spine of the defense. He seems to be like an inside out guy. I don't know if that's some of that's probably philosophical, but also the roster he inherited. He's got Devin Witherspoon. He's got Reek Woolen. He's got two young, cost-effective Pro Bowl corners. He's got some guys on the edge and Darrell Taylor and Boye Mafe and Derek Hall and Nwosu. So he has the outside. So maybe that's like part organizational philosophy, part like, shoot, all our guys on the perimeter are cheap anyway. So let's address the spines. But Nick, I just gave you another promotion. I put you right back. You snuck back in to the Seahawks front office. They still don't know how you got in, but they turned you and said, Nick, we're trying to get stronger up the spine in this draft class. Help us. Who should we look at if that's our mandate?
Oh, we just talked about big Devondre Sweat, and he would be one for them. Like in the middle, I don't know where he's going to go. He's a tough one. There's some people that have talked about him. Maybe if he sneaks into the bottom of the first because he's so big and he moves so well, but he is the rare 340, X 360. Actually, I think he's 365 is what he was, something like that at one point. But the rare, just ginormous guy who isn't just a nose tackle. He and Byron Murphy, who I think Murphy's going to go in the first round. He's really, really good. Hang on, bud, 1 second. Those guys can play either spot. Like you can see in the inside there, they can flip and change, but like they can play either side. So like I think that's the uniqueness there with those guys. And so you see Sweat in them. So I'm watching it instead of looking. But yeah, he's really good against the run and the pass. And I think he's a guy that can play as big as he is. And you don't want to, sit there and say, do I want to have him out there all 3 downs? I don't know. But like, you could have him for 2. Like that's a guy that could go out there and maybe get up to quarterback a little bit too. He's a big player.
Yo, I'm with you. I had to double check the weight. I said, wait a minute.
He's huge.
Hold on.
Yeah.
How
And he
big
moves.
is this kid?
Look how he moves too. Like, and that's the thing. He's not just a guy that stands over the center and plugs 2 gaps. Like they'll put him right over a guard or even inside a tackle sometimes and let him go do some crazy stuff. So he's a freaky guy. I like him a lot. He's Kris Jenkins, who Macdonald coached at Michigan, is another one in there that's a little more undersized. I think he played around 300 pounds, but he might be about 295, 290. But he's a guy, again, who can play a couple spots and just get in there and thrash and just plug gaps and fill. And that makes all the sense in the world because they have 2 really good corners. And, I think they don't really have a whole lot in terms of get after it, pass rush right now. So plug the middle, take away the inside, take away the run. That's where the game's going right now, like we talked about anyway. So I think that's sort of, mode number 1. I would be kind of surprised if we don't see Seattle address this in the first, couple picks here.
He's reminding me a lot of Damon Harrison, aka Snacks.
He's like a quicker Snacks. That's a good point. Yeah, because he's got a little bit of more wiggle, like to him. He can shake a guy. He doesn't have to shake a guy, but he's so big. But he does sometimes. Yeah.
I'm looking. I'm seeing 6'4", 366 for Devontae Sweat,
and he's been that. I think he's been that all the way through. He was at the Senior Bowl and he was at the Combine. He played at 365, I think, last year. So it's not like one of those weird things where they list him at 366 and he's actually 400 pounds. Like I think Mike and Wayne Yu for the Patriots was that way at one point. Like he was like a 395 pound player that they kept listing at 350. That's not the case with this dude. It's straight all the way through. He's just 366. His skeleton probably weighs like 290 pounds or something at this point.
So the Seahawks have been they've been trying to find a dominant 3 technique for pretty much since they traded Michael Bennett to the Eagles in the spring of 2018. And they've tried a few different attempts at this. They've tried to put LJ Collier there. They drafted Malik McDowell in 2017 out of Michigan State. Thought he could be that interior pass rush
laid
guy.
Plans there, yeah.
Yeah, they've tried a bunch of stuff. Even now, they paid Draymond Jones last offseason. They just traded for Leonard Williams, although they expect him to play a 3 nose, little 5. But basically, they want that interior pass rush on top of getting stronger up the spine. So with that in mind, am I bugging here, or does it seem like this is a decent 3 technique class?
No, it is good. It is good, and I think that for me, like we were talking about, maybe what they're going to do in the first round, like Byron Murphy. I think is a top 20 player in the draft. I think he's better than Newton from Illinois, who I think is also probably a first round pick. But like those guys at the top are guys that I think would help a team like Seattle right away. And they're in that range where it wouldn't, if all else fails and nothing else works for you, that's fine, whatever. If you didn't do that, though, to your point, Mike, you can keep going down the list here. And there are guys as you go that you would be able to do something even in day 3. Evan Anderson from Florida Atlantic is a kid that I saw him at the Shrine Bowl. I think he'll be there probably deep into day 3. Who's a big 3, what is he, 3? I think he was like 313, 315. He's a little shorter and has a little bit, he's like oddly shaped, but a guy who nobody can block. He just comes off the ball and just eats the center and just takes 2 gaps away and nobody can do anything with him. So similar to the situation that we just talked about with guard, where all those guys are coming out at 6th year, they all stayed. A bunch of guys did that in college here too. Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa is another one, a small school guy. Justin Rogers, a big plugger from Auburn. McKinley Jackson from A&M. So there's a lot of guys that like have been around and maybe could have gone out in a different time, but now they're here. And so, yeah, it's a deep trench class, like in general, I think this year. So it's a good year to finally get it done. I feel like Seattle, they talk about this every year. It's like, oh, they need a guard and a center again, like somehow, right? Like how'd that happen? And they need 2 defensive tackles again. Like, but I think this is a year, if you wanted to double up even on one of those spots, you probably could. There's enough talent there to do that.
Yeah, so defensive tackle is pretty interesting for Seattle because they have allocated resources there. They drafted Cameron Young out of Mississippi State last year as a nose. They drafted Mike Morris from Michigan as like that kind of 3 technique. And then Yeah, they paid, like I said, paid Draymond Jones, just paid Leonard Williams, already have Jaron Reed, just picked up Jonathan Hankins to be like that vet kind of space eater. I think he's like 320 or something like that. So they have bodies there on top of I think they tendered Miles Adams as well. So
Yeah.
they have bodies there, but this seems like the reason I asked about the three technique guys is because it seems like we could get some guys with some high ceilings here, perhaps, and that is what I'm really interested in the particular context of a guy you mentioned earlier, Kris Jenkins.
For Michigan. Yeah.
Tell me more about him.
Yeah, so that's Kris Jenkins Jr. That's I don't know if you guys remember. Maybe you're too young. Kris Jenkins Sr. played in the NFL. He was a Jet, I believe, with the Jets, a couple other teams. Big, awesome interior nose tackle. He was 330, I think, something like this. Big guy. So that's his dad. His uncle is Cullen Jenkins, who played for the Giants forever. And Kris is like a hybrid of both these dudes. Cullen was a defensive end, and Kris Sr. is a nose tackle. And Kris Jr. is probably the most. I don't think he had quite the combine people thought he would have, but I think he's probably the most explosive interior pass rusher in terms of, he had like a 33, 34-inch vert at one point. I think like he could really get up there at 300 pounds and really get under people and sort of just create sort of havoc. So I think he's a guy that, again, a little bit like maybe a poorer man's Byron Murphy, in that you wouldn't be worried about it if he were lining up in the, if he was like a zero tech or a three tech, or even if you were trying to play odd front, which Macdonald plays even and odd, he'd probably step out and play a little bit of heavy end if you had to do that too. And, again, I don't think that it'd be the worst thing in the world for him to take a guy that understands what he's trying to do right now, because Macdonald doesn't do simple stuff defensively. It's going to be complex and complicated and a lot. I think I read that he's going to call plays too.
Yes,
for a while.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be simple. That's not him. It's not going to be easy. So I wouldn't be shocked at all to see, a Michigan guy somewhere off the board defensively that he played, that played for him. And Jenkins did. He had a really good year. Actually, he had a better year, I think, with Macdonald than he did with the other guys. So that would be one that I think would be an interesting fit for sure.
Kris Jenkins, 6'2", this is the son, not the dad. The son, 6'2", 299. Oh,
299. Yeah.
Too.
He's a freaky dude.
Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, and I keep bringing up guys they've coached before. But like, if you can get the match of like, hey, I kind of know you
exactly,
and you do what I need, like I
get it, man. And I don't have to not be myself, and that is such a big deal. I've noticed that with defensive coaches over the years, especially in recent years, because defense is like, it's an offensive league now, and the defense gets no love from anybody. It's just like it's a horrible job. It feels like, right? And a lot of these guys, they end up kicking themselves at the end of the year because they're like, I got away from doing what I knew was going to work because we had to do X, Y, and Z. These defensive guys always are just like, I want to be myself, and I want guys that are going to let me be myself. And I think that's what you're speaking about there. Like, that would be a good fit, or anybody that really knows his system that could come in and help, or just not have to be worried about, I guess, and, plug in right away. Yeah, that would work a lot.
I want to ask you about, I don't think that they'll necessarily need to go with this spot in the first round. We talked a little about Byron Murphy. You mentioned as a guy who's like a first round guy, pretty much a lock. What you mentioned, he's better than Johnny Newton from Illinois. But if they did, let's say like, Nick, you're bugging. We're going to take Newton. Maybe back to like 20 or 2021, pick up another pick and take him. How would he fit, you think?
I like him. Same, it's the same conversation as when you're talking about a Jenkins, a Murphy, or Braden Fisk, even the kid from Florida State who had an awesome combine, who I think really made himself a ton of money. But Newton is a similar thing. You could probably play three spots if you had to do it. You can play nose, three tech, and if you're going to play some of that, he's fast enough and quick enough. If you're going to go outside, like if your tackle isn't, on his game, you can beat a tackle. You can beat a tackle inside or do something like that if he had to. Like, he is a modern day, defensive tackle. I think him and Murphy are the two that stand out above everybody else in terms of just consistent when they were locked in. And the reason why I think Murphy's ahead of him, he's younger, but also it's more consistent with him. It's every single snap he is coming off the ball and just knocking somebody. Newton, there would be times where you'd be like, I don't know if he feels like doing it on this series. And then there would be times where you're like, oh my God, he's just taken the game over and has just decided they're not going to run right now. So there's some of that with him, which maybe that's playing on a bad team. You know, I don't always like to hate on guys when you play. That team was terrible last year, Illinois. Like if you're playing on a crap team and you're like, I'm not here for this. Sometimes, like I don't always hate that, right? But there was some of that on his tape, which I think maybe drops him a little bit in some people's eyes. But man, he's a nasty player when he wants to be, and if you can get him turned up and cranked loose, like he'd be another one. Fits right away and fits with what they want, or with what Macdonald will want, which is athletic, power, and twitch inside that could just cause destruction in there.
To me, that sounds like the perfect project John Schneider would love to bring in. A guy that is perceived to be someone that my team sucks and I'm really not here for this. Well, come to Seattle, man. We are an organization that prides ourselves on A, B, and C. We're going to make it work. And maybe it does. And maybe he becomes this really talented player within that defense. So I think that's someone that could be really big for Seattle, especially with what John Schneider likes to do with some of the draft picks in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, he's one too, like you mentioned, you know, a trade down or whatever. The range on him is so wide that, you know, who knows? I mean, if he's sitting there longer than you thought he was, you know, that could be a guy that maybe you make a move for. So like, he's one that I think depends on what you need and what you're trying to do. Like Sweat is a different conversation where he's a big, you know, going to be a big first down, you know, run stuffer and all that sort of thing. Whereas Newton, you're going to try to get him in there. And maybe if you can get him for 3 downs on some series, that would be, I think he can do it. And I think that's a rare trait and something everybody wants right now.
I think he'd be reuniting with Devin Witherspoon.
Yeah, they played together. Illinois had some nasty players over the last couple of years. Like, I don't know what the hell. They're not good. Like, the team had some pretty good, but they have had some really good defensive players come out of there, man. I don't know what's going on. They're not winning. They won a couple years ago. They were good when Witherspoon was there. I shouldn't say they were never good, but they got a lot of players. Players.
You hear that, John? You hear that, Mike Macdonald? This is the time to get it right. Because they've been trying, man. They've been really throwing stuff at the wall, hoping it sticks at this particular position. They pretty much allocated all the resources possible since trading even before trading Michael Bennett. They drafted Malik McDowell. He broke his face on the ATV. And like, all right, we'll just give up a 2nd-round pick for Sheldon Richardson. Well, that didn't work.
Right.
You know, and they just keep cycling it.
I think the other part, too, we talked about this earlier. With Pete, you had a system, and it didn't change. And you had to draft guys that fit the system. And, like, Macdonald has a different system, and I would argue that it's built for the modern game, which is more flexible. So the system is going to morph around your guys. So you don't necessarily have to get so worried about. So I think that's what maybe ended up happening there is they've thrown all this money and effort at trying to find a fit for them instead of just being like, let's just go get a really good player and then make it work around him. Like, that's what all really good defensive coordinators in today's game do, you know, anyway. It's like, you have to just make everything that you have work. You have to just assume that you're getting like the short end of the stick compared to everybody else. And you're going to have to make it work. You're going to have to just find a way. And in a lot of ways you are, because that's how football is sort of works today with the rules and everything else. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think not to just dump on Pete's old staff. I do think they had a little stretch there. I think they got over this after a little bit, and you could see it with. I think they had a stretch where they were starting 2 5'9" outside corners, and it was like, oh, okay. Pete has seen like this is what I have to work with. Then I will adjust the things around the guys. But for a little bit there, it was like, all right, let's find another Cam, another Earl, another Sherman.
Right,
like
another
Shaquille Griffin at a UCF, and it was like, man, this guy even kind of looked like Sherm. Like, you guys are going a little too hard at this particular like archetype, I guess, of a Legion of Boom replacements. And it's like it doesn't really work, like that. You got to just get the best players, and if he's a different height, weight, body type than Bobby Wagner, but he's a really good replacement, then roll with them. Although I do think that's what they were thinking with Jordan Brooks. He is probably around the time they were like, okay, let's just start taking the best guys.
Take the best guys. And if they're the mental Earl Thomas or whatever, then do it. If they're the mental, whatever, I think that's what you can sort of look at today and get away with it. But yeah, just like the guy, he's got to be 6 foot, whatever, or we can't even look at him, or he's got to have these 34.5 arms or we can't even look at him. Like, those days are done, and I think that's definitely, and they're done in college, more importantly. College kids come in as freshmen now and they play spots that they never thought they were going to play because these kids all are like, make me as marketable as possible for the NFL. I want to be able to do everything. So when I go into a meeting, I can tell them I can play 7 spots or something crazy like that. Like the kid from Mizzou. I don't know if you guys at the combine, Darius Robinson, the edge from Mizzou, was like, I play everything from 0 through 9, 1, 2, 3. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if you can play everything, but he kind of did, a little bit at Mizzou. So it's like, it's not a bad thing to be a tweener anymore and to have multiple spots and be a little bit weird. So I think it's a different time, but I think that it's good that they're where they're at right now with that staff, I think.
0 through 9 is ambitious.
That's ambitious. I think you can do like 4, maybe 3 through 7, but I don't know.
Like, yeah, you got a kid who plays 0 through 9. I'll take you. I mean, hey,
yeah, right. Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't know.
They're not
Lawrence
gonna know
Taylor,
what
but other than that,
no, I think that it took them a little bit to get beyond that, and understandably so, because they had so much success with a certain type of defense. But
right, why would
the problem
you change?
is, like, you even look at the Broncos a little bit. They whooped their butt in the Super Bowl, and they were like, "Yo, their corners were big. We should get some of those." And, we can get some of those, or even the very next year, the Patriots go get Browner, and they screw you in the very next Super Bowl, right? Like other teams start looking at, hey, why don't we do what Seattle's doing? They're taking Seattle's coaches, they're taking Seattle's front office people, they're taking their scouts. It's like, well, you're not the only team looking for 6'2" corners with 32-inch arms.
Exactly. Everybody wants it now. Yeah.
Everybody's after the same thing. So now, it changes. So hopefully Mike Macdonald and his staff and John Snyder like, yo, let's just get dudes. Players, maybe if their arms you got the T-Rex arms, or they don't got the right length, or whatever, a little light. Hey, man, if that dude can ball, just put good football.
Witherspoon was that last year, wasn't he? I mean, to a degree. I think they did it last year with him. And they did it higher than everybody thought they were going to take him, too. I mean, I don't think a lot of teams were like, what the hell, man? Because I think everybody was like hoping he would fall because he's so good, But it's like there were people that thought he was too slow or too this or too that. So, yeah, I think you could do that.
Yeah, they saw a good football player, and they were like, if we don't take him, the Detroit Lions will. So,
yes, they would have. Yeah, absolutely. They would have tripped over themselves to do that for sure.
I was talking to I don't even remember who I was talking to, but I do know they work for the Lions. I actually legitimately don't. Colton Pouncey was with me. He'd probably know. He does know. But anyway, they were just like, they were telling us, yo, when you guys took Spoon, we were in our draft room like furious.
Well, what are we gonna do now?
Yeah. I think they traded back.
They traded out. That's when they traded out for Gibbs. Because Holmes said that night, he was like, we were gonna take Gibbs at 6. Or whatever pick it was, 7. I was like, no, you were not. I'm like, you were clearly taking Witherspoon, and then he went off the board, and you had to get out of there because you were like, we don't know what to do.
Right.
So yeah, just get good players. And the Lions, Holmes is the king right now of just draft good players. Don't worry about what they look like. Don't worry about the positional value at whatever. Like if the guy can play and he fits what you're doing, draft him. And I think Macdonald will have a good influence there. And then I think Schneider's done that too over the years. He's done that. I think it's just a different time, and they can do it again.
This will be the last thing. Although I do want to mention this about Brad. Brad is in the position. Brad Holmes, the GM of the Lions, is in the same position as Pete Carroll was in after the 2022 season. Where, and it seems like Brad might have done this, but if Pete would have just come in there after Geno played great for a year, and then Russ had the worst year ever, and just be like, guys, I know what the F I'm doing. Okay. Do we have that understood, like in a press conference? Pete never did it, to his credit. But after that draft class that Brad and those guys had, where they're taking linebackers here and tight ends there, and running backs here. Brad just walk in. Brad should do his pre-draft press conference and just walk in like, guys, he might have already done this to it.
He did it already. He did it. He did it at his at locker cleanout day. he did it that day.
And he earned that.
That's what we all said. Yeah, man, you earned the right to do that.
He's like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I drafted good players. Take your positional value, shove it up your butt. We just went to the NFC title game.
Yeah, and we're going to draft good players again. And exactly. Yeah, just that's all it is anymore. That's all it is. Everything changes so fast. So you just have good players, worry about everything else later. I think that's kind of the move now.
Yeah, you can hardly ever go wrong drafting good players.
No,
last time I checked.
Nope. Still works.
Yeah, I don't think that fails. Chris, we got anything else for Nick before we get him out of here?
Nah, Nick, we want to thank you for the time, man. We appreciate it. On your busy Friday, we know the last thing you want to do is be podding, maybe. I mean, it looks like it's sunny out there, so.
Oh, yeah, we are getting a little sun for a change, yeah. A little different. We're getting there.
All right. Nick, is anything you want to plug? Any mocks coming out? Any pods coming out? Let them know. The floor is yours.
We got a bunch. The Beast is coming out soon-ish, so we'll be on the lookout for that. Of course, Dane's draft guy. But yeah, well, I'll have another mock here, and I think maybe in a week and a half. And then just find me on Twitter at Nick Baumgardner, and we'll talk draft.
All right, well, Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you guys for watching and listening to the Seahawks Man to Man podcast on Blue Wire, on the Athletic, not the Athletic, we're not there no more. On Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube, all of that. Thank you so much. Thank you again, Nick. We will catch you guys on our next episode. We're gonna still talk some draft until it comes up. So until then, we'll catch you next time. Peace.